Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Christmas week is here. Are you ready for the holidays? Holy smokes. Hope you all had a nice weekend, that the shopping is concluded, that you're not overwhelmed with stress, and that you can enjoy the next couple of days. Maybe I'm saying that all out loud so that I hear it myself. Friday poll result. Let's go over some results since we were last together. Friday poll result, 30,846 votes were cast. Will the Friday release, remember now, posted this before the Epstein files were released. This was asked before we saw anything. Will they be of any great consequence? 78.6% said no. I think you'd have to say so far that was the correct vote on the poll question. Again, that was the voting before when all was said and done, it was like a 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time release. We'll talk more about that for sure. But that's how we felt before we saw the Epstein documents. Okay, now the Saturday poll question. Will the release of any Epstein files result in new criminal charges? 44,486 voted on this. 83.75%, I think, again, had the correct answer in saying, no, the release of these Epstein files, loosely described, will not result in any new criminal charges. Sunday poll question, again with the Epstein theme. I break that streak today, but again with the Epstein theme. Is Bill Clinton being scapegoated in the Epstein file release? 31,166 votes were cast. 79.09% of us, I was in this category again, said yes, Bill Clinton is being scapegoated. You know, the hot tub shot and all of the images that now he wearing that shirt. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you paid close attention to the Epstein story over the weekend. Like, he's the guy who's front and center, much more so than President Trump, for example. I delivered a commentary on Saturday on CNN, and I said it was an unsatisfactory but predictable outcome, the release of this first tranche of the Epstein file. When you think about it logically, the gargantuan, and by the way, this was then cast in some quarters as Smerconish defends Trump administration release of Epstein documents. Well, to a certain extent, because I thought all of the conversation about the redactions just misunderstood the nature of the task at hand. And by the way, on my YouTube page, I think one of the cooler things that we did this weekend, it's about a 2-minute long tape where I show you a scrolling through, the DOJ Epstein documents. And you can see how they're categorized, how they're organized. It's just not an easy task to take more than 100,000 pages of documents in the span of 30 days with a team of, what did they have, 200 lawyers? And all of the privacy considerations and the interests of minors who may have been victims of sexual assault. It's a hard task. Very easy to criticize and say, oh, they didn't give us this and they didn't give us that. Monday's poll question, is Turning Point USA ultimately a political asset or liability for the Republican Party? What a weekend they had in Phoenix over the span of 4 days, all the speakers, all the controversy. And here I thought from my youth, I thought that the Conservative Political Action Conference, that CPAC, was often like the bar scene from Star Wars. That's got nothing on what happened at Turning Point USA today. Thank you to my friends at BetParks and Play Gun Lake. There's always another way for you to win on the BetParks app or the Play Gun Lake app. It's right here in the palm of your hand. Do what I do, make your downtime fun time. Man, there was a lot of great action. I really enjoyed watching, how shall I say it, black and gold in Detroit. And the old guy, Aaron Rodgers, still was something in the tank. What a weekend for all of your wagering, both college football and the pros. Right now, BetParks and Play Gun Lake, they've got a great holiday offer for all new users. Download on the app and get a $50 casino bonus back on the new slot game that everybody's talking about. It's called Huff and Lots of Puff. Plus, get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. Play classic casino games for real money. It's Play Gun Lake and it's Bet Parks Casino. You got to be 21 and in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Maryland for the Bet Parks app, 21 and in Michigan for Play Gun Lake. Your casino bonus has to be wagered. BetParks.com, PlayGunLake.com for all the details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. I will get back to the Monday poll question. Is Turning Point USA ultimately a political asset or liability for the Republican Party? I will get back to the Monday poll question in just a moment. But can I run through, please, the headlines of the day from the Smerconish.com daily newsletter? There's so much in it. My God, for the 22nd of December, Christmas week, there's just so much news and information that is worthy of our attention. My lead story today, and I might not say much more about it other than right now, but it's the lead story in the newsletter. Russian general killed by car bomb in Moscow. And I made this the lead story because of the significance. I mean, a Russian general was killed early Monday when a bomb detonated underneath his car in southern Moscow. Russian law enforcement officials say it makes it the third such killing of a senior defense official since last December. I wanted that to be in pole position because, to me, it speaks to the fact that it's now Christmas week. There is no, and I guess not by the Orthodox calendar. Maybe that'll be a saving grace, right? They celebrate later, but there's no peace. And doesn't appear that there will be any peace accord reached at least this holiday week as between Ukraine and between Russia. My second story, Todd Blanche did the circuit yesterday, the Deputy Attorney General defending the administration and the release of the Epstein documents. Many questions, valid questions, people wanting to know, well, where is everything? You didn't meet the statutory deadline. You took down a Trump picture. Now you put back up a Trump picture. Why are there all these redactions? Blanche went on a number of the shows. I watched him with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press. Their lead, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, said Sunday that the Justice Department's decision to remove over a dozen photographs yesterday that had been released as part of the files on Epstein has nothing to do with President Trump and came at the request of victim advocacy groups. So therein, lies the difficulty of having to get all of this information out in a 30-day span when you're talking about more than 100,000 documents. I think there's a benign explanation for much of what was released and not released. Powerball, nobody hit it. It means that tonight there's a boatload of money at stake. How's that? A ton of money at stake in Powerball. It now has climbed to $1.6 billion if you're wagering. My fourth story today in the newsletter came from Axios' coverage, MAGA Media Riffs at Convention. And I also have in my hand the New York Times print edition. I mean, it's just incredible to think of all that went on. Since 2021, Turning Point USA's annual gathering, America Fest, has featured a star-studded roster of conservative influencers and politicians who have been virtually unified in their focus on a common foe, one that Charlie Kirk, the group's co-founder, called the woke left. But over the weekend in Phoenix, speakers at America Fest scarcely mentioned Democrats and other liberal foils. Instead, some of the most prominent right-wing leaders in the country criticized members of their own movement, calling them frauds, pompous, and even a cancer. That was the takeaway from Phoenix. From Australia, in my fifth position today, in follow-up to the Bondi Beach massacre. So this is interesting. There was a memorial service held at Bondi Beach, and the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, arrives and gets heckled because of the perception of him being soft on anti-Semitism and too much too late. The crowd, which had been gathering on the grass overlooking the ocean and embracing old friends in shared grief, suddenly took to its feet as one. It booed and shouted shame. The anger was electric. It vibrated across the beach to the footbridge where two gunmen opened fire on a peaceful Hanukkah celebration 1 week before, almost to the hour. Good news. Headline number 6 comes from The Guardian. Thousands gathered in the UK this weekend at Stonehenge solstice. What is the good news? The good news is we're beyond it now. It's the 22nd of December, and so we are adding, we're adding seconds of daylight now, and then it will turn to minutes of daylight each and every day, and more sunshine is coming for those of us who don't like the diminished daylight in the winter. I'm at the top of that list. Item number 7 in the Smerconish.com daily newsletter. By the way, do you like the headlines? Do you like a little newscast aspect of the headlines of the day, all drawn from the daily newsletter? This is a story from USA Today under the headline that I wrote, "Be careful in giving this gift." Be careful in giving this gift. Here's the way this story begins. Don Anderson will always remember September 19, 2021, a Sunday when his life changed forever. The now 60-year-old podcast host had a chaotic childhood. His parents divorced when he was 5. They each remarried, had more children. Step and half-siblings surrounded him. When they were adults, though, they learned that his older sister wasn't actually their father's daughter, that her mom was pregnant when they met. Anderson went on 23andMe to help figure it all out, only to be confused by his own results. Further along in the story, I saw that of 23,000 respondents to a survey of DNA services, 3% discovered a parent was not actually their biological parent. 5% found full or half siblings, according to research from the Baylor College of Medicine published in the American Academy of Human Genetics. What's the point? I'm totally into Ancestry. I love 23andMe. I love Ancestry.com. I love MyHeritage. I find they have good search engines for the old country. But if you give this stuff as gifts, look out, because there might be some surprises along the way. Okay. Headline number 8 from the Smerconish.com daily newsletter today. There was a power outage in San Francisco this weekend. And Waymo cars, which I love, I've used them in driverless cars. I've used them in Phoenix. I've used them in LA. I've used them in San Francisco. I feel like I'm leaving something out. I may or may not have taken a Waymo ride in Austin, but Waymo cars got stranded and blocked intersections. Why? I don't think it was necessarily the power outage. It was the reliance that they have on the lights at crossings. And so they were confused, and it like just set off this chain reaction. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to work out the bug, but that's what happened in San Francisco this weekend. I'll give you just 2 more. Headline number 9 from the newsletter today, The Washington Post, no blacks or women represented in coins. There's going to be a new coinage. I think it's a quarter that's going to come out for the 250th anniversary of the nation's birth. And there will not be, this is a subject for really good conversation on an extended basis when I'm not just running through the headlines. But there's a controversy because, okay, the founding fathers, a bunch of white guys. So the plan for the last 3 years had been, we shall recognize not just those of 250 years ago, but those who've led to, I'm paraphrasing here, but positivity and achievement in the country for the last 250 years. We will include people of color. We will include women. Trump administration, new sheriff in town, no DEI according to them. So now we're back to all, white people on the coins. Great subject for conversation. Read it in the newsletter. Headline number 10, it's an Epstein story, a particular Epstein story about a woman who feels a sense of vindication. Her name is Maria Farmer. Jeffrey Epstein hired her to purchase art. And back in the 90s, back in the mid-90s, like a decade before all eyes were on Epstein, she made a report to the FBI that he was interested in child pornography. And so one of the takeaways from the Epstein release this weekend is that a document was produced which says exactly what she's told people all along. I told the FBI, and they didn't act on it. There are 10 more stories in today's newsletter behind those 10, which are my lead items. Thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for signing up for the newsletter. It's free and it is worthy. Okay, now let me turn to today's poll question at Smerconish.com about Turning Point USA. They had their gathering in Phoenix, probably the clearest snapshot, I think, of where the GOP is headed post-Donald Trump. Turning Point USA had their annual, they call it America Fest. They drew more than 30,000 people. They say more than a third of them were students. It makes it the largest gathering in the organization's history. And as far as I know, the Democratic Party doesn't have anything akin to this. I mean, Republicans have long had, going back to the days in the early 80s when I was a college student and a very active Republican, I used to go to the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. And then CPAC grew into something that doesn't resemble what I remember it being. We can have that debate as to whether I changed or whether the Republican Party changed. I think both, but the party changed more than I did. But CPAC has become somewhat of a Star Wars bar scene. And this looked like this was the successor. All the momentum after that horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk, very charismatic widow that he leaves behind, a lot of goodwill in the Republican Party. But what ended up happening? This year's America Fest didn't just showcase conservative unity, it showcased conservative fracture. So let me recount and play some audio and video, if you're watching on YouTube, what transpired. Ben Shapiro, I think this was on Thursday, delivered one of the most confrontational speeches of the weekend, directly addressing Tucker Carlson's decision to platform Nick Fuentes. Here is some of Ben Shapiro from over the weekend.
There is a reason that Charlie Kirk despised Nick Fuentes, and indeed even chided Dinesh D'Souza for debating him.
I am not hearing.
He knew
Right.
that Nick Fuentes is an evil troll, and that building him up is an act of moral imbecility.
I'm not
and that is precisely
Thomas,
what Tucker
will we be able to hear any of these, or we won't be able to hear any of these? Because I can just describe what transpired. Just tell it to me so I can hear.
Let's describe it.
Okay, we're not going to have any of them?
We're not going to have any of them.
Okay, so I will tell you exactly what transpired. So it's Thursday, and it's Ben Shapiro, and he gets up, and of course, recently Tucker Carlson has interviewed Nick Fuentes, and says Ben Shapiro, if you host a Hitler apologist, Nazi-loving, anti-American piece of crap like Nick Fuentes, you ought to own it. And then he went further, and he invoked Charlie Kirk's name, and he said, there's a reason that Charlie Kirk despised Nick Fuentes. He knew that Nick Fuentes is an evil troll and that building him up is an act of moral imbecility. Love that word. And that is precisely what Tucker Carlson did. So now Tucker Carlson comes out and speaks, in albeit not as prominent role as had been set aside for Ben Shapiro. He says, I watched and I laughed. Carlson has consistently argued that hosting controversial speakers is about resisting gatekeeping, not endorsing ideas. Tucker Carlson said, everybody's going to be like, you're a Nazi, just like Fuentes. But then I'm like, I don't think Fuentes is going away. So there's back and forth between them. Now Steve Bannon comes out on stage. Bannon escalates the situation by dismissing Shapiro outright, calling him the farthest thing from MAGA, and then adds, Ben Shapiro is like a cancer, and that cancer spreads. J.D. Vance, the vice president, closed the conference. He was embraced as the movement's future. He said, I didn't bring a list of conservatives to denounce or deplatform. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to be an American. I am saying something simpler and truer. Christianity is America's creed. You get all these viewpoints and controversies that were expressed at Turning Point USA in Phoenix. Then comes a cultural surprise. Nicki Minaj, she appears on stage with Erica Kirk, praises President Trump and Vice President Vance, calls them leaders that people could relate to, and says they were one of us. Her appearance reinforces that Turning Point USA is not just a political organization, but it really is a cultural movement. I made reference to the way the Times wrote this up today. Over the weekend in Phoenix, speakers at America Fest scarcely mentioned Democrats and other liberal foils. Instead, some of the most prominent right-wing leaders in the country criticized members of their own movement, calling them frauds, pompous, and a cancer. Driving the enmity have been some of the most explosive and unresolved issues confronting the MAGA movement. Resurging anti-Semitism, the prevalence of conspiracy theories, and the rise of the concept of heritage Americans and what that notion, considered by some to be a thinly veiled racist dog whistle, means for non-white conservatives. Further along in the story, without Mr. Kirk, the movement's bold-faced names appeared to be jockeying over the weekend to influence the direction of the MAGA movement at a time when its most towering figure, President Trump, is in his second term. For some true believers, it was hard to watch. On Saturday, Benny Johnson, a podcaster, pined for a time just a few months ago when conservatives were unified in grief and purpose after Mr. Kirk's killing. And then it talks about Ben Shapiro. The first sparks came on Thursday night with a blistering speech from Ben Shapiro, founder of the media company The Daily Wire, who bemoaned the frauds and the grifters in the movement and went on to savage by name a roster of powerful right-wing figures. An Orthodox Jew, Mr. Shapiro, argued that the movement was being harmed by commentators, especially the podcaster Candace Owens. There's another character in all of this who's been accused of anti-Semitism and who's been floating wild conspiracy theories about Kirk's murder under the guise, Shapiro said, of just asking questions. And then it goes on to talk about Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. It talks about Candace Owens. At the end of the story, she was a speaker in 2024 after she had begun claiming that the wife of the French president, Emmanuel Macron, was a man. Hence my reference to the bar scene at Star Wars. But you have to ask yourself, on balance, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion. Democrats don't have anything similar. And your Monday poll question today at Smerconish.com asks, on balance, is it a net positive or negative for the Republican Party? Is Turning Point USA ultimately a political asset or liability for the GOP? That's the poll question of the day. Go to Smerconish.com and cast your ballot on that now. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast about the daily poll question, please know you can watch on YouTube. Set yourself up for notifications on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm live on radio today and Tuesday, wishing you all good things for the holidays. If you celebrated Hanukkah, I hope it was a great celebration. See ya.